The Eye of Horus, also known as left Wedjot eye or Ujjat eye, specular to the Eye of Ra, is a concept and symbol in ancient Egyptian religion that represents well-being, healing, and protection. It derives from the mythical conflict between the god Horus with his rival Set, in which Set tore out or destroyed one or both of Horus's eyes, and the eye was subsequently healed or returned to Horus with the assistance of another deity, such as Thoth. Horus subsequently offered the eye to his deceased father Osiris, and its revitalizing power sustained Osiris in the afterlife. The Eye of Horus was thus equated with funerary offerings, as well as with all the offerings given to deities in temple ritual. It could also represent other concepts, such as the moon, whose waxing and waning was likened to the injury and restoration of the eye. The Eye of Horus symbol, a stylized eye with distinctive markings, was believed to have protective magical power and appeared frequently in ancient Egyptian art. The eye symbol was also rendered as a hieroglyph. Egyptologists have long believed that hieroglyphs representing pieces of the symbol stand for fractions in ancient Egyptian mathematics, although this hypothesis has been challenged. The ancient Egyptian god Horus was a sky deity, and many Egyptian texts say that Horus's right eye was the sun and his left eye the moon. The solar eye and lunar eye were sometimes equated with the red and white crown of Egypt, respectively. Some texts treat the Eye of Horus seemingly interchangeable with the Eye of Ra, which in other contexts is an extension of the power of the sun god Ra, and is often personified as a goddess. The Egyptologist Richard H. Wilkinson believes the two eyes of Horus gradually became distinguished as the lunar eye of Horus and the solar eye of Ra. Other Egyptologists, however, argue that no text clearly equates the eyes of Horus with the sun and moon until the New Kingdom. Rolf Krauss argues that the Eye of Horus originally represented Venus as the morning star and evening star, and only later became equated with the moon. In this episode of Off the Cuff, I'm going to be doing a sort of supplemental to the blog The Real SGT Pepper, which you may want to look at before watching this because it may seem like mumbo jumbo if you don't familiarize yourself with this topic a little bit. But basically, I did 2 written blogs on The Real SGT Pepper, and I did a video where I sort of cover it all. And most of this information was taken from the book The Memoirs of Billy Shears. This is all very abstract and obscure, so I stress again, if you're not familiar with this topic already, if you haven't watched my blogs, if you haven't read this book, this may be a lot to digest here because I'm going to digress even from this area here. I'm going to go out on a limb and just talk about something I wanted to get into, something that I've been wanting Mike Williams, sage of Quay.com, to go into, but I don't believe he has. And he's sort of the authority on this topic on the internet. So I'm going to go into it, hopefully to provide, something original for you people to chew on. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this image, the Eye of Horus. We've all seen it. It's been promoted a lot in the mainstream media lately. And Egyptian mythology is very fascinating and very interesting. And the Illuminati try to use it to mesmerize you, flashing cool stuff in front of you and creating an aura of mystery. Ooh, do you want to know the secrets? Do you want to know the knowledge? Do you want to know how you can get true power that other people don't know about? They entice you. They know what they're doing, okay? And so they put together this version here, which we call the Eye of Providence. And it's on the back of the $1 bill, the United States $1 bill. And it's got the blazing lights behind it, which is supposed to represent the sun or Venus or the human intellect, which is what they worship. And that's at the heart of Luciferianism. And it's the logo for the Illuminati, which is a blanket term to sort of describe all of the secret societies that are trying to control the planet, and they're trying to control everyone in it. And they've got to kill off a lot of us to make us either easier to control, kind of like a farm where you've got a bunch of sheep. If you've got too many sheep all over the place, you can't take care of all of them. So you'd probably rather just do away with them so you can control these sheep here in this particular farm. So this is what they want to do. So, when you talk about raging against the machine, This is the logo for the machine. When you talk about fight the power, this is the power. When you talk about sticking it to the man, this is the man here. So I just want you to think about that next time you're at a rock concert and you see it in a band's logo or on the, tattooed on the guitarist's arm, or you see your favorite Hollywood artist, flashing the sign, or you see some fancy website that says, join the Illuminati and, learn how to unlock your personal potential. Anytime you hear this kind of language and you see these little symbols, this is what it's about. And Billy Shears talks about this a lot in the book because he's one of them. And that's one of the reasons why I liken the memoirs of Billy Shears to a sort of unpleasant autopsy. I mean, an autopsy is important, right? You want to know how the person died. You want to give closure to, the loved ones, or you want to find out how they died and maybe find the one who killed that person, An autopsy is unpleasant. And this book is like an autopsy. It's unpleasant, but I think there's important information in it if you, approach it sincerely from that perspective. So we're going to be talking about Paul's right eye, or Billy Shears' right eye, which is something that Mike Williams of Sage of Quay has gone into. But I'm going to go in a different direction that I was kind of hoping he would, but he hasn't. So it's all very abstract, but as it relates to this topic, we're talking about this chart here, the Eyes of Horus, where you've got the Eye of Ra or Re. You might remember from Star Wars, the recent trilogy, Re is the hero. It's Egyptian mythology by way of the Illuminati. Eye of Thoth, left eye, right eye, sun related. So as it applies here, we want to talk about the right eye and how it's related to the sun. After reading this book, The Memoirs of Billy Shears, there's no doubt in my mind that Billy is a member of the Illuminati and probably all sorts of other outfits. But he really drives this point home by emphasizing this Eye of Horus / Eye of Providence rendered with his own eye in it. And he uses it as a sort of asterisk or like a footnote indicator. So when you see this eye, this tells at the bottom of the page, you're going to see, an expansion upon what's being said right here. And there are places in the book where he suggests that he has a prosthetic eye. And this is something that Mike Williams of Sage of Quay has explored, where they talk about, different pictures and photographs and images where it really looks like his right eye is fake. And the purpose of this picture here is, well, not just to see how different the two of them look. Look at this nose. That's the original Paul McCartney. And look at this nose, Billy Shears. That's quite different. But look at his eye. And he talks a lot in the book how one of the most irritating things, one of the most difficult things about, becoming Paul McCartney was that he had to constantly remember to push his eyebrow up like that. And part of that is, I guess, trying to look like the original Paul McCartney, because I guess that was kind of one of his signature gestures when he was on stage. But he ties it in with this whole Eye of Horus reference and all this, occult symbolic stuff, referencing the Illuminati religion that he seems to be part of. And when you look here, you can kind of see his eyes look like they're looking different directions. And this isn't that out of the ordinary. I mean, a lot of people have eyes that are slightly off alignment, especially when they get older. But as I stare at this, even as I speak, if I just look at this eye and I look at that eye from my peripheral vision, you can kind of see a color difference, a slight color difference. And I swear that I can maybe even see a texture difference. These are things that, you tend to see if you're thinking about them. If you're not thinking about it, you don't see it at all. Here's a more recent picture, and you can see when Paul turns his eyes all the way in one direction, you can see this one's all the way that direction, but this one seems almost not quite all the way. Now, obviously, Paul McCartney / Billy Shears is very rich, and he's got the money. If he was going to get a fake eye, he'd have the money to get one of the best ones you can get. And, I knew a kid who had a messed up eye. His real eye was actually kind of pushed in. and it didn't really have an iris or a pupil. And his glass eye went over it. So he actually had his original eye underneath his glass eye. So the reason I'm explaining that is because when someone has their real eye behind their glass eye and that real eye moves, it can also move the glass eye. So it can look like the eye is moving, the eye can be moving, but it doesn't mean it isn't fake. So the purpose here isn't to convince you that his eye is fake, but that this emphasis on the eye and this connection to the Eye of Horus. Now, Paul Stanley from Kiss are known to be fans of the Beatles. Gene Simmons in particular talks about them a lot in the books that I've read about Kiss, the biographies. And they talk about how part of their decision to have everyone sing was sort of an homage to the Beatles because they all sang. And you wouldn't really associate the Beatles with Kiss. They're generation apart, and they sound very different. Now, Paul Stanley's original name, Stanley Burt Eisen. So he changed his name from Stanley to Paul, which is kind of interesting because Ace Frehley's real name is Paul. And so, it wasn't cool enough for Ace, but it was cool enough for Paul. It's just kind of weird. And Paul's nickname is Star Child because of his eye. He's got a star on his eye. You starting to see where this is going? The blazing star, the illuminated eye. Now, Paul Stanley is hard of hearing in his right ear. Supposedly this is a birth defect. But it's just kind of strange that the same side that Paul McCartney / Billy Shears has a defect, his missing eye, is the same side that Paul Stanley has a defect. Now, I've always thought Paul Stanley had a very peculiar face. Look at this. I mean, it was the 80s, 70s, 80s, the height of hair metal. And you could just see all the work he's got done here, just all the products he has on his face. But look at his eyebrows. Look how dark they are. Almost looks like he painted his eyebrows on. But, nothing really out of the ordinary other than just the comical, overdone 80s thing. But I've always noticed over the years that he does this a lot with his eye. See the way he raises it like that? This is something I've noticed for as long as I can remember. It's just something he does. I always thought it was really weird. And in some pictures, it's so exaggerated. I mean, look at that. Now, I don't think that Paul Stanley has a false eye. I think his eyes are real. I just think this is kind of strange and noteworthy. You can look at this. In fact, when I first started reading this book, something in my mind said, why is Paul Stanley's eye, being used as an asterisk here? But it turns out it's not. It's supposed to be Billy's. But what I'm getting at here is, are they part of the same cult? They're high up in the entertainment business. And, there's been lots of accusations about Kiss being an occult band. And that's something that I've laughed at my entire life up until very recently. Something that's really hard for a lot of people to grasp is the idea that all this symbolism that's shoved in their faces every day in the mainstream actually has a consistency to it which reflects the views and the beliefs of the occultists that are putting it out. And we're sort of trained not to take it seriously, to call it fantasy in daily conversation. But, when someone comes along and says, well, hey, look at this and this is kind of weird. What do you think of that? We're sort of trained to react by laughing, just going, oh, he's talking about conspiracies again. You know what I mean? And I think the joke is on us because you have to kind of actually think like them to start to see that this is how they think and this is what they believe. And there's kind of an interesting parallel here to what we've been talking about that ties into the Norse mythology of Odin. Odin was not always an omniscient deity, despite being the omnipotent Allfather. That is what drove his quest for knowledge and wisdom. He ventured far and wide in order to obtain this information, sacrificing everything in the process. Odin eventually became one of the wisest gods in Norse mythology, but there was still one Norse deity who was somewhat wiser than him. This deity's name was Mimir. He was thought to have divine knowledge of the entire cosmos. He attained this position by drinking from the well of Mizbrunner, also known as the Well of Wisdom, on a regular basis. When Odin discovered the source of Mimir's knowledge, he went to the Well of Erd and went to Mimir, the well's guardian, and asked permission to drink the water from the well. Mimir agreed to give Odin a drink from the well, but he had to pay a steep price for it. In exchange, he had to sacrifice one eye. Odin agreed, and after plucking one eye, he was able to drink from the well. The water in the well is said to be sacred and to have the power to heal and grant unlimited true knowledge and wisdom, but not in an academic way. What he obtained was spiritual and ethereal knowledge. While there are many theories as to why Odin sacrificed his eye, the most popular one is that he did so in order to gain unlimited ethereal knowledge and unmatched wisdom. I think that's what a lot of people are looking for when they turn to Freemasonry or some of these New Age religions or the Illuminati in particular. Now, I know there are lots of Freemasons who, their father was a Freemason or their grandfather was a Freemason, and they just sort of got, grandfathered into it, and they may just be normal people that don't really give a shit either way. They just did it because it was tradition. And there are lots of different Freemasonic lodges with all kinds of different rules. So I'm not trying to blanket all Freemasons as being like bad or good or, prescribing to what I'm talking about here. But when we talk about the Illuminati specifically, this corresponds exactly. It's all about the search for knowledge and the worship of the human intellect. So that's what they're selling. And they cloak it in all these mythologies and all this symbolism to mesmerize you, to draw you in. With this sacrifice, he let go of the profane way of seeing, clouded by numerous imperfections, in order to acquire a more divine and holy one. Already in the past, his everlasting quest for wisdom had led him to do something similar. He hung himself for 9 days and 9 nights on a branch of the world tree Yggdrasil in order to obtain knowledge and decipher the runes. Now, in the memoirs of Billy Shears, there's lots of numerology. And you can see that Billy Shears seems to be obsessed with numbers. Although the encoder, the name that's written on the bottom of the book, Thomas U. Harriot, he supposedly is the guy that assisted Billy in making the book and to encode all kinds of stuff like numbers and hidden messages and such. But Paul makes it very clear that his number is 9 for some reason. He's all about 9. And you see here, Odin hung himself for 9 days and 9 nights. And the book, Memoirs of Billy Shears, was actually released on 999, as was the Beatles remastered catalog. So this is just something I wanted to put out there. Maybe someone else wants to expand upon it. Maybe I'll expand upon it more someday. But I just thought this was kind of interesting and worth putting down in my weekly off-the-cuff series here.